So the risk is that, okay, I'm leaving a stable job and getting into a startup. What if it doesn't work? The point is, I would have learned so much things that another startup would hire me for a way better salary than what I'm drawing right now. Right. So probably I think if you change your mindset, the point of view, right, the center of your thought process, if you change that, I think it becomes easier to take those risks.
Welcome to The Career Flipper, a weekly podcast all about career change stories from people in all kinds of industries. We talk about how they get from point A to point B and all the twists and turns and surprises in between. If you've been thinking about switching careers, consider this your permission slip to go ahead and do it. I'm your host, Jenny Dempsey, a career flipper myself. After 18 years in customer service and tech startups, I got laid off and I turned to furniture flipping, rescuing pieces that were headed for the trash and giving them new life. You can check out my makeovers over on San Diego Furniture Flipper on TikTok and Instagram. I started this podcast because honestly, I felt pretty alone and a little wacky with my career flip. But I started to talk to others who made the leap too, and I learned that tons of people out there are flipping their careers, and hearing their stories has been really inspiring. And it made me realize that it's never too late to switch lanes, and every single conversation that I have with a guest teaches me something new. We all have so much to learn from one another. And I figured if these stories are helping me feel a little more confident and a little less alone, they might help someone else too. That's why I started The Career Flipper, to share these amazing journeys and offer support to anyone thinking about, in the middle of, or just past a career flip. Okay, on to today's episode. Ever wonder what it's like to step away from the comfort of a steady corporate job and dive headfirst into the whirlwind of founding your own startup, where you're suddenly the one wearing all the hats? Meet Tushar Jain from India. He's the founder of Enthu.ai, a software designed to help coach sales and customer service agents, improving overall customer experiences. Tushar didn't just flip his career once, he's done it twice. First, he left the stable enterprise job to join a startup in a completely different city. Then, he took the ultimate leap and became a full-time founder of his own tech startup. His journey is all about taking risks, embracing change, and finding the non-financial rewards in entrepreneurship, like more control over his time and being able to spend quality moments with his family. Let's get to the conversation now. Hi, Tushar.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi, thanks for joining from India today. Where exactly in India are you?
So, Jenny, I'm very close to New Delhi. There's a place by the name of Chandigarh, right? It's up in the north, so around, I think, 250 kilometers from New Delhi. That's where I'm located.
Wow. Love that. That's so awesome. I'm so excited to have you join today and tell your career flip story. We've connected on LinkedIn through the customer experience community. So I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit more about who you are so people can get to know you before you talk about the big career flip.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jenny. And I think first, thanks a lot for inviting me to this podcast series. Right, it's a pleasure. I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Tushar Jain. I am the founder of a B2B SaaS company by the name of Enthu.ai. Now, we help customer-facing teams, aka call center agents, right, improve the quality of their conversations by deploying AI. When we talked on LinkedIn, it was a I was expecting that you will be asking things around customer experience and other related things, but it was a completely different thing, Tushar. So your question that Tushar, have you flipped career, right? So that was quite
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting and exciting. And yeah, I had two career shifts in my journey, and I thought I can add value to this podcast. So yep,
Yeah.
happy to talk about those career flips.
Oh, I love it. And I love the little surprise because, yeah, that's what I've done for like almost 2 decades, customer experience. So to do this is very unique, which is why I'm on the path of talking to people and really learning from anyone else who've done this. So I feel less alone. So, yeah. So, okay, 2 career flips throughout your career. Tushar, share your story. Tell us your career flips.
Sure. So I think I'll talk about my story first. I'm an engineer and an MBA by education. After my MBA, I had a typical enterprise career path where I was part of billion-dollar companies, right? Part of their sales team, consulting teams, right? Working with enterprise customers. I did this for around 5 or 6 years, and then I was there in New Delhi while I was doing this, right? Mumbai, New Delhi, changed a couple of cities, but the career path was very standard and very uniform. But then in 2014, I had to shift my city, right? So I have to move from a tier one city to a tier three city where I am right now, right? Which is by the name of Chandigarh. And when I had to do that switch, I mean, there are no big companies in my town, in my city, right? So I got an offer from a startup, right? And obviously, I had to go for a pay cut because the salaries in a big city versus in a tier two or tier three cities, they are way apart, right?
Yeah.
Plus, the startups in 2014, especially in India, they were not the startup scene was not as bright as what it is today, which means now startups based out of Chandigarh are giving you tier one salaries. That was not the case. So I think that was the first career flip where you have to completely switch your path, working in an established company, working with, having very good practices,
Yeah.
people practices, learning. Okay, learning is everywhere, but I think from being a very, in a very structured environment to in a completely haphazard and firefighting mode, that was my first career flip, right? And I can talk more about it, right? But the second career flip came when, so working in these startups for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
uh, I always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but it was buried deep somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working in these startups, I realized that probably, I mean, uh, it was always on the back of your mind that, okay, I should start off my own. I had ideas. I was doing some side gigs. So in 2019, I took that plunge of jumping into a full time as a full time startup founder, right? Leaving my job behind and starting. And yeah, it has been almost 5 years since I started, and I'm really happy. I mean, I can't be sorry. I started. I mean, that was the best career decision that I have taken, I would say.
Wow. So, okay, going from working for a company that had a high salary and then moving to a place where you have to really start over again from, a whole different city. And then also, you mentioned the pay and just like experience wise and new people. And
Yeah.
then going into your own business. And
Mhm.
you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit, but you buried it down. Why did you bury it down? Like, what was it about it that made you feel that you had to?
I think once you have remained in a career again, and that's what I feel, right? And I think, and that's my story, right? After you have spent a couple of years in a stable job, right? Uh, I think you get used to your salary. It's a dope, right? And that's a difficult thing to give up, right? So always on the back of your mind, you have think that, oh, one day I'll start on my own. I'll do this. I'll do that. But when you get that salary credited message on 30th, right? I think that's a difficult thing to give up. So I would see right now I am a startup founder, but if I hadn't taken the first career flip, which means I transitioned from a stable, easygoing job into a job which has so many ups and downs, and your belly, I mean, you're always, there's a firefighting mode, right? That gave me that exposure that, okay, this is what a startup culture is like, right? And then again, going from there to that, okay, now can I, rather than being a employee in a startup, can I be the founder of that startup, right? So I think that was a complete transition. It's not that, it was buried, but probably the time was not right. It had its own journey, right? I have to see things that, okay, uh, uh, I would say as a person, you have to evolve, right? I evolved. It's not that I wanted to do something and the next day I took a decision. Probably I have been working for around, I think, 17 years now. So it has been an evolution. The career flips have been a major contributor to what I am today, right? The decisions I took, I attribute them to these two career flips that I made, that I had. So yeah, again, to answer your question, to cut it short, right? It's not that, it was buried deep inside. It's okay, it was buried deep inside, but I think it had to take its own sweet time to evolve and come out.
Yes. Okay. So that makes so much sense because a lot of these things, like it doesn't happen overnight. That's really the biggest thing. Like you mentioned, or I hear a lot in the interviews, like when I'm chatting with individuals around the world talking about this, like there's that moment where it's like, this is when I decided to jump and then you jump, but it
Right.
takes years. And you mentioned, that you evolved, you learned
Right.
things, you experienced things, and it all were breadcrumbs toward this big decision to jump. So it was more of like almost like calculated risk in a way. You felt, I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably felt more prepared to take that jump. And even though it still was a jump, you felt more prepared because you had kind of been working in that direction without maybe really planning the whole time, but it just led you to it and it felt like the right thing. Does that kind of sound? Yeah.
Absolutely. And because you're talking, I think you made a very interesting point about risk taking, right? I
Mhm.
think probably, if I see my journey, there are no risk, or the risks are really limited. But in your mind, you amplify those risks and you feel like, oh God, the earth will tumble if I'll take this risk. But eventually they are not even risks. So I'll give you an example where when I was working in this metro city, I was working in New Delhi, I was working with McKinsey and Company, right, which is a very big brand, right. When I shifted to Chandigarh, my home city, right, I worked with a startup which probably not even 10 people have heard about it, right. Now if you think about it, right, okay, the risk is huge, right. To a naive person, the risk is quite huge, right. But what's the risk there? If, let's say, things don't work out with this startup, I can always go back and join another company in New Delhi, right. So
Yeah.
point is, most of the times we just blow out the risk out of proportion, which is probably, if you give it some logical thought. And same with my second career flip, right. The startup scene was booming in India, right. And the type of learning that you get in startup, the financial outcomes that you can build for yourself in startup,
Yeah.
I would say if you are not doing a startup, you are taking a bigger risk, right. So the risk is that, okay, I'm leaving a stable job and getting into a startup. What if it doesn't work? The point is, I would have learned so much things that another startup would hire me for a way better salary than what I'm drawing right now, right. So probably, I think, if you change your mindset, the point of view, right, the center of your thought process, if you change that, I think it becomes easier to take those risks.
Yeah. That's such a good point. It is a good point. It is all mindset. I know for myself, I am always blowing things out of proportion just because I get scared. I get scared. All the what ifs, right? The what ifs, like what if, like you mentioned, what if it doesn't work out? What if I don't make enough money, or all the things. And but you don't know until you do it, and then
Absolutely.
you can always go back. You can always do something different. And I think a lot of us put ourselves in this box and we're like, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
And then if it's outside of that, we magnify that risk, and it's completely unnecessary because we'll miss out on a lot of the, experiences and opportunities. So I'm curious, like
Absolutely.
when you took that, you were like, I'm going to dive in, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start, my own company.
Uh-huh.
What was that experience like for you at first? Like, were there
Oh.
moments of imposter syndrome? Were there moments of like, why did I do this? Like, what did you enjoy it? Like, what was that like for you?
For one complete year, Jenny, it was horrible. It was deeply horrible, right? Again,
Yeah.
again, the reason is because you are used to drawing a salary, and for one year, you don't get that message on the last day of the month that the salary has been credited to your bank account, and that's really, it feels eerie. It feels eerie.
Hmm.
And another thing is, obviously there is risk, right? It's situational. My situation might be different than yours, right? But I planned for my situation. I had some savings in my account, right, and I used that. But you know using that pool of savings, right, without adding something to that pool, but taking out, it's really a crappy feeling, right. So I think the initial 1 year was really really hard, both from financial perspective, because you don't have an active source of income. Second, you are used to salaries, you are used to getting something, right, and it's not happening. Third, you are into a startup and you don't know where it's going. So just for the record purposes, my first startup tanked, right. It didn't took off, right. I hardly, I mean, when I started, COVID happened within I think 8 months, right? And probably the startup was not offering any value, and that's why the customer dropped, because it was not a good to have product. It was not a must have product. It was a good to have product, right?
Yeah.
But I think it happened for good, right? That customers dropped, so I could pivot earlier than later, right? But if you ask me, I think going through all these three things without money, without a startup which has, and without customers, that was really, I mean, it was a horrible feeling.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely understand that, living out of your savings. Well, it's wonderful to be so prepared to use it. A lot of the times it's like we don't want to have to use it. And then when we do,
Yeah.
you mentioned that feel. Yeah, it is just kind of like I'm grateful, but at the same time, like, oh, I really want to replenish this.
Right,
And
exactly.
yeah.
And I think looking retrospectively, I think that's not a right mindset to have.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
when you have such type of mindsets, you really play restrictive, right? Your attention gets divided at, okay, should I do a side gig? Should I fill this kitty? What should I do, right? So I think, if I have to give someone a suggestion, I would say go all in, right? Play it like a poker, go all in rather than, because as I said, there's no risk. What the worst that would happen is, after 1.5 year, I would be left with no savings, which means
Mhm.
probably I have to get back into job, and I'll get into a better job, right?
Mhm.
At least in my part of the country, the
Yeah.
startup scenario is so good that I don't carry a real risk there, right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to look like that. I mean, you have to look at the situation like that, rather than being fixated on the things which you have left in the past, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely one of those things where it's all mindset again. And if you don't try it, you'll never know. And
Yep.
there's also, and also actually a question I was going to ask was, and I don't know if you've experienced this, when you do live in that kind of, it's almost like a scarcity mindset,
Yeah.
of like you start making, at least I've started to make, or I have in the past made decisions based on that are not aligned with the actual goal that I'm on. Like I'm on a goal
Yeah.
to build, a particular business, and then I
Mhm.
get afraid of not having money because it takes time to build that. And so then I
Mhm.
choose, I go get this, whether it's a part-time job that I don't actually really want,
Yeah.
but I'm just doing it to do it. And then
Mhm.
I might not show up as my best self, or I might go and like, try to, put more energy into finding the money instead of staying on the path. And I find that takes away from the main goal, and then it takes more time to build that up, and the energy, I'm depleted. Like, did you ever experience any of that kind of like jump, I got to make money, and then it's like, wait, what am I doing? Like I shouldn't, the mindset thing, and going back to that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that used to happen. In fact, that used to happen for a good amount of time in my entrepreneurial journey, right? Because I mean, that's what the journey is, right? You are leaving the things in the short run to gain, to have bigger outcomes in the long term, right? But I think our mind works in short term, right? It's as good as a pound, penny wise and pound foolish. That's the mentality that we have. And sitting at this point, giving someone stitching back my story, it's easier said than done, right? When you are in such a situation, because you have to pay your bills, you have to pay for your family expenses, right?
Yeah.
You always keep on getting back to the thought that, okay, how would I, let's say, pay my next bill, or do XYZ, or societal pressure, how would I get my next vacation, or I mean, you have to give up those things, right? That's the entire societal pressure. But the objective is, am I gaining something from in the long term? That
Yeah.
should be the ideal scenario, ideal thought, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. I'm
Yeah.
sure no matter how much you tune yourself, how much you coach yourself, our mind is tuned for short term. It's just that, so the point is, you have to manage risk, you have to manage your thoughts, right? These thoughts will come, you will feel low. It's just that you have to just manage that low point, and then get out of that lower point, and then ride the wave, and wait till you get the next low point, and then again ride
Roller
through
coaster.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
roller coaster, exactly.
Yeah. And there's other things that show up for me, and maybe you resonate with this too, of like the non-money things. Like, yes, there's so many of the money and,
Mhm.
gains and, and challenges, but there's also like the amount of time and flexibility and dreaming. I don't know if you've experienced this, but when I got out of kind of the, rigid status of burnout from working a lot in corporate, I started to like have dreams again. I started to like feel like less, not necessarily less stressed because it was stress in a different way, but like I just felt more like myself again. I felt like I was contributing to my relationships. I was showing up as a better version of myself because I was able to like go on a path that was like actually lighting me up, even though it has all the challenges. Did you ever experience anything like that when you're like, I'm following this and this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to build this company,
Mhm.
and there's other things that are really showing up for you, like more time with your family, more, whatever it is, like did that ever show up for you?
Uh, it did. You're talking from a positive perspective or from a negative
Yes,
perspective? So,
a
okay.
positive, like any non-financial gains of taking that
Oh,
calculated risk.
oh, non-financial gains. I think the biggest non-financial gain is I'm the owner of my time now.
Mm.
Though I'm working, I'm doing two full-time jobs. Earlier, I was doing one for probably 8, 9 hours. Now I'm working 16 hours, right? But the
Yeah.
point is, these 16 hours are, I mean, I have the control of my time, right? I wake up early, I come to office early, right? I spend some quality me time when no other employees in the office. I leave my office early, right? I spend time in the evenings with myself. I then had a couple of calls during the evening, right? And I mean the entire I can see I'm in control of my time,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And that means there are I can have vacations. I do travel, right? But again, it's not at once when you are an employee or when you are working full time, right? uh, you are cut off, right? Now I just have to manage. I mean, my client calls go on while I'm having dinner with my family in a restaurant or while I'm vacationing somewhere. But I think that has become a second nature. It's about how I it's not about work life balance, it's about managing both of them together, right? So I think that's the biggest gain. I can spend, rather I am spending some very quality time with my family. So I have a kid, right? So I actually play outdoor games with her, and that's only because I am the owner of my own time, right? Otherwise I'm sure it wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. There is so much like freedom and flexibility to be able to be the owner of your time and to do
Yeah.
the things that you want to do. And so you have these things, you have the right mindset, you jump in, and now you are, running the company. It sounds like two companies. And so you're doing all of this, and I'm guessing, like, what is there anything that you would have changed when you decided to take this dive in? Now that you're at this point, was it 5 years in? When you look
Uh-huh.
back, is there anything that you would have done differently?
One thing from business perspective, right? If I have to, if I would probably take that decision uh, much thoughtfully now, right? Whether I have to go into entrepreneurship or not. And again, it's not about going into entrepreneurship or not. It's about what to do in entrepreneurship, right? Which idea I am picking, right? So when I started, if I look back at my story, I think the first idea that I picked, I didn't research it enough, right? It was just like, okay, I was just feeling stuck in a job. It was like, okay, let's start something. And the first idea that came across, I just picked it up and started doing. Right? I think that was a stupid thing to do. Probably the best thing is when you have a job, let it be, right? At least be thankful that you are getting money to pay your bills. Start building the idea, think about it, start talking about the idea, start validating it with other people, right? Reach out to people on LinkedIn, build a business case before you plunge into it, right? Again, don't go to an extent, because I mean, again, the problem would be that at to what extent should you think about, because in the if you give it too much of a thought, everything is impossible, right? Because that's how our mind works. So you need to know that, okay, is it being thought through enough, right? Is there a real demand in the market? What are some of the early wins, early customers, early prospects, early friends who can help me here, right? And then take a calculated risk, right? Do it with your job and make it a smooth transition rather than you know just being feeling frustrated. Probably I think that's a wrong thing where I see a lot of people saying I'm frustrated with my job and that's why I'm starting entrepreneurship. that shouldn't be the case. And even if that's the case, give it some time, think through it, right? And transition over a period of time rather than just fine days snapping all the ties and then thinking what to do.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think that goes back to mindset too, where I know myself, like in the past, there would be I've had a lot of wonderful jobs, but sometimes I made it harder than it needed to be. And no matter if I changed the job, I was like, oh, I'm so frustrated here, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Well, it's the same problems. And guess who the common denominator is? Me. And so
So,
I had to really like look into, well, what is causing me the frustration? Oh, I'm saying yes to too many things, or I'm, do whatever it is. And so, and I love that you bring that up because when you leap out of a place of frustration, you might be missing the things that you are putting into the frustration. Like, how are you contributing to it? It is a two-way street. There's multiple things
yeah.
that go on. There's different ways to bring things up and to resolve issues, but a lot of the times it's us like going back, making it bigger than it should be. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up of like, if you're going to take that calculated risk, like do it
Yeah.
from a place of like, it kind of this, I don't know if it's like a solid ground, but to do it from a place of like, just own your own stuff. What is causing that frustration in the first place? Because I'm guessing, if you were to leap into something out of that, you might just run into the same challenges, same roadblocks, same feelings, and it might even be magnified because it's all you. It's all you
I
doing the
think,
company.
yeah, I think transition from a point of vantage, not from a point of weakness, right? That would be the right thing to do. And to do that, you have to be mindful, right? If I am always going to blame my boss or my work, I mean, it's going to remain the same, right? I'll find the bosses are similar, the work is same across the companies, right? It's
Yeah.
about me, right? I can find joy in boring work, right? And I can't find joy in super exciting work. The point is, if I'm thinking of something, think. I mean, if I'm trying off a career flip, the only what I'm trying to say here is think about it, right? Sometimes another thing can be that. So for in my case, the job that I was doing, right, in a startup, I had built so many connections in there, and I used those connections when I started on my own, right? So in a way, my earlier job it actually gave me a step or two on which I could build my next startup, right? Otherwise I would have been feeling fresh, starting afresh, right? So I think there are multiple ways to think about it, right? But be thankful that you have a job. Don't feel that in frustration. Just think about what you want to do and how your current job can help you, and then go ahead and take a calculated risk.
Yeah,
That's what.
definitely. And lean on the network, lean on the people that you know, ask for support that, has to run by ideas, like use that network that you've built. I think that's also really important. Important point because we can't, as much as we are doing it ourselves, we also can't just do it on our own. We have a whole community out there and there's great people like even, talking to you today, like it's just a great opportunity to connect with people and learn from one another to continue forward on our own path. So,
Right. And in fact, I have seen, again, that's also a our ghost in our minds. People are very, very helpful, right? You go to someone with a genuine ask for help, right? That shows in your messages, that shows in your tone, right? Obviously, I understand most of these social media platforms and everything, they are very salesy right now. But still, if you reach out to someone with a genuine ask for a help, people are actually helpful. At least that's what I experienced, right? People were super helpful. They were open to listening to me. They were open to helping me out, give their suggestions. And I mean, that contributed to my story. There are countless people. I can't even count the number of people who helped me out cold, right? I mean, some people knew me, but there are a lot of people whom, I mean, you are a perfect example. I just reach out to you, we started talking, and then we decided that, okay, let's have a conversation, right? So I think people are really helpful if you reach out with a genuine ask.
yeah, agree. Agree. It is hard to weed through a lot of the salesy things that are out there,
Yeah.
but there are the genuine connection opportunities. It is for sure. So, oh man, this is like such a great conversation. You have so much wisdom and so much insight because of your journey. So, how can people find you and connect with you if they want to learn more about you or ask you questions?
Sure. So I think the best channel is to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. I keep sharing my startup stories, the learnings that I get from Enthu.ai. right? So I'm available. Just search for Tushar Jain, Enthu.ai, and you would find me. And just buzz me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to connect and take the discussion forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share. This is so wonderful. You are so wise and so insightful, and I really appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much, Tushar.
Thank you, Jenny. It was a pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Career Flipper. Be sure to connect with Tushar using the links in the show notes. If this episode gave you a little boost, share it with a friend who could also use some inspiration. Rating and reviewing the show helps more than you know, and hitting that subscribe button means you'll get more amazing flippin' stories like Tushar's every week. We also have a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to over on thecareerflipper.com. Your support helps me reach even more career flippers and those dreaming of making their own leap, challenging the stigma while spreading all the good vibes and motivation we need on this journey. And if you're considering switching careers to customer service, or maybe you just want to be able to support customers better through your business that you're flipping to, I've been there and I've learned a lot along the way. So to help you on your journey, I have 2 online courses that break down how to work better with customers. They're quick courses, under an hour, budget friendly, less than $50 each. And if you're ready to learn from my customer service experience from back in the day and get some practical tips, visit thecareerflipper.com/courses for all the info. What I love most about doing this podcast is the hope that it might inspire you to go after what you're dreaming of, even if it feels incredibly scary right now. I know it's hard to take that first step when the fear of the unknown is holding you back. But if I could ask one thing of you, one thing, it would be to put your shoes on, take a deep breath, and take that first step. You never know where it might lead, and I believe that you can achieve whatever you set your mind to. Keep on your path, my friend. What's the best that could happen?